Kriegsspiel. I am here today with Carter, our newest minted master umpire of the International Kriegsspiel Society, and we are here to find out what the heck happened at last weekend's Battle of Harper's Ferry. When I was on, I did my regular 9 a.m. Sunday episode. I took a peek into what was happening in the battle. I had my own thoughts and predictions about what was going to happen, and to my surprise, well, maybe not, I was wrong. So today we're going to talk to Carter. He's going to kind of lay out what happened, kind of some of the background, what happened in the battle, and we're going to find out why he didn't kill General D.H. Hill. First, real quick, I want to suggest to everybody that you check us out on Patreon. Thank you for all of you who are supporting us so far. Your support does help this podcast, and it helps the International Kriegsspiel Society. Also, check us out on Kriegsspiel.org and join our Discord to join the International Kriegsspiel Society and get in on some of these super awesome games. All right, Carter, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. I am really curious about this game, and I know our audience is curious as well, and they might have some questions when they tune in and ask. But in the meantime, what can you tell me about the Battle of Harper's Ferry?
Yeah, so historically speaking, the Battle of Harper's Ferry was fought on September 15th, 1862, and was one small part of the Maryland campaign. Now, essentially, the historical scenario is that there was a garrison of about 14,000 men defending the town, and about 26,000 Confederates trying to pin them in the town and then force them to capitulate and surrender. And we've pretty much got that replicated here with some minor twists because we're running a whole campaign here. The Confederates and the Union had some decisions that they could make before the battle. The Confederates were able to decide which divisions would appear on which sides of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers. So as you can see, the Confederates have elected to deploy two of their divisions to the northeast on the Maryland side of the Potomac River here. If I just ping over here, that's the divisions of John R. Jones and Alexander Lawton, which is actually technically Ewell's division, but it's under the command of Lawton. And
Mm-hmm.
so they've elected to deploy them over here to attack what they think there are these defended trench lines on the Maryland Heights here. They believe that the Harper's Ferry garrison is going to be defending their historical line, which, as you can see marked out here, goes from Fort Duncan along General Barnard's lines to the Stone Fort and then down the Maryland Heights. And then, of course, the Boulevard Heights on the other side of Harper's Ferry. But the Union elected for a little bit more of a unconventional deployment, but I'll go through the other Confederate divisions here. They've got A.P. Hill on the main bank here, the landward side, opposite the Boulevard Heights here in what is now West Virginia, which back then was Virginia. And they've got the division of D.H. Hill, Daniel Harvey Hill, on the Loudoun Heights side, the Virginia side of the Shenandoah River. And so they're going for a three-pronged attack on the Confederate lines, hoping to seize these bits of high ground above the town and use them to force the capitulation of the garrison with some well-placed artillery fire. Now, the Union, on the other hand, went for a little bit more unconventional of an approach. They knew that they were going to be outnumbered significantly, and that their defensive position was not a great one if they lost the admittedly very stretched line that they would have to defend otherwise. So instead of defending the Maryland Heights, they decided to abandon that side of the Potomac River entirely, and instead elected to have a large force in town ready to go to cross the Shenandoah River and attack straight up the Loudoun Heights. They were going for a sally attempt, basically. They were going to try and gain local superiority to knock out one of the Confederate divisions, to buy them time and free up troops to defend other parts of the line. And that's pretty much the setup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're planning to come this way and sally out. They have left this wide open, of course, and of course they're defending here.
Yeah, that's actually, I should mention, this is a reverse slope defense here that they're doing on the Boulevard Heights.
Okay,
Bavilia, who is playing Henry McIlvaine, who
right,
is in charge of this garrison sector,
right.
elected to defend on the reverse slope so that they would be impervious to Confederate artillery fire, which, as you saw when you were peeking into the game, that was actually what was happening. Was the Confederate artillery couldn't see anything because they were on the opposite slope.
Mm,
Um,
brilliant.
so, yeah.
There we have it. Okay, so when I peeked in, one of the things that I noticed was that this unit, these guys here, did not look like they had their act together. They looked like they were late for the party. They were still trying to come in and form up. I noticed that there was a substantial Union force here coming in or threatening to come in at any time. And I also noticed that this attack appeared to have stalled, and this attack had gone in but was repulsed. And
Yeah.
I also noticed that the garrison was on fire. And
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I don't know how to make flames, but there you have it. So the garrison was on fire. And I'm curious, first of all, if that garrison were to be caught on fire, I would expect that it's under artillery fire from up here, from this corps that's coming on. But that corps didn't look like it was in position to set fire. So did the Union set it on fire themselves?
Yeah, so if we delete these lines here, and then if I move 5th Brigade out of the neighborhood,
Yeah,
um,
I'm trying to erase them, but it doesn't want to
yeah,
erase.
I can just
Well,
do
there we
that.
go. There we. Oh, well,
And
all right,
it's fine. It'll be okay. Don't worry. I've got the final game state here. I'll reveal it to you
all
all.
right.
Um, so the arsenal here, this is a federal arsenal. That's where they if you've ever studied American muskets, you've probably heard of like the Harper's Ferry 1842 musket,
Yep,
right?
yep.
The reason it's called Harper's Ferry is because this is a rifle factory essentially. They make guns,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the Union objectives was to prevent the capture of the guns in the arsenal for the Confederates. Historically, that was something that happened. They captured the arsenal and took something like tens of thousands of muskets to help them arm themselves. And so the Union defenders here were going to prevent that from happening at all costs. And they had been given explosive charges, ostensibly to blow up these bridges here across the Shenandoah and the Potomac. Now, I had told them this pontoon bridge here, right? Pontoons are held together essentially by ropes and wires. They could just cut that loose. But they had enough to blow up both of these bridges, the other two bridges with the explosive charges. They elected to place explosive charges on the railroad bridge going across the Potomac, but decided not, because of their offensive strategy, to place breaching charges on the Shenandoah Bridge. Instead, they used those charges and decided to prepare the arsenal for destruction should they need to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was about when this attack went up the Loudoun Heights and encountered an entire Confederate division, which was larger than their own, and there was a bunch of heavy fighting in the dark here, and they were bloodily repulsed, almost lost an entire brigade. The Union decided that the town might fall at any moment and elected to blow up the arsenal, which is where all of the smoke and flame came from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with regard to the sluggishness of these divisions up north under Lawton and Jones, they were I wasn't in their voice channels the whole time, but my assumption is that they were expecting heavy resistance along the original defensive line. My assumption is that they were trying to poke and prod, see, like, they thought it was a trap, essentially. They thought they were going to get ambushed up there.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't think that it was going to be undefended,
Mm-hmm.
which, I when I heard the Union strategy for the first time myself, I was surprised too. I wouldn't have expected it. It was certainly unexpected.
Yeah.
But they were acting on the assumption that this was some sort of trap, when in reality it wasn't. So that unintentionally worked brilliantly in the garrison's favor, leaving them abandoned because it both it probably slowed the Confederates down more than if they had actual troops up there,
Mm-hmm.
and it allowed them to try, unsuccessfully, but it allowed them to at least try some kind of offensive action to stall the Confederate attack.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was a brilliant strategy. And then, of course, AP Hill's attack, which you mentioned, coming across this bit of terrain here, which was mostly wooded. It doesn't appear that way on the map, but the map, if you look closely, it doesn't show any trees. So I had to basically tell players where trees were and where trees weren't
Mm-hmm.
before the game, and in some cases during the game. And so they were advancing through trees, got up to the Boulevard Heights here, and found that they were undefended. And so Jackson, thinking that the day was won, ordered his troops over the heights, AP Hill's division, and they came face to face with a shotgun blast, essentially, of musket fire from these two brigades defending the heights on the reverse slope. They didn't take too many casualties. They got very lucky in that regard. But they were shaken up. They retreated back over the other side of the hill. Went, wow, that was a little bit unexpected. And then once they had gotten themselves back together again, went over the hill, and it basically was a back and forth fight for the entire game up until right near the very end over this Boulevard Heights position here. The key to that position, though, and Jackson found it, played by Crises, he noticed this gap in the line where he could get flanking fire down this trench.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately knew that that was the door handle. That was his way in. And sent two brigades through and broke them. And so the Union line ended up retreating back here. And that's pretty much where it was at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
As far as D.H. Hill goes, once he cleared out the initial sally from the garrison, he decided to try and charge across the bridge. He figured time was of the essence, when in reality it probably wasn't. The Union were more on the clock than the Confederates were in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
But he pressed the bridge, and Union brigades on either side were defending it to the death, pretty much. They had taken up position in these houses and were firing pop shots. They were not subject to a lot of effective musket fire themselves, while they were dishing out a fair amount of effective musket fire onto the troops assaulting the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And so, despite them being technically outnumbered, they were able to achieve fire superiority in that sector. The Confederates attempted to bring up units along the banks of the river here to try and give supporting fire to their assaulting troops.
Right.
But they were driven back
the enemy
by these cannons.
Brilliant.
And so the cannons essentially allowed the Union to achieve fire superiority everywhere along that sector. So they really had, D.H. Hill, there's a few things he might have done to reduce his casualties, but he was squarely the focus of Union attention for the entire game. They pretty much just focused on his sector alone. So I'd say that the fact that he took heavier casualties than most isn't just because of his decisions. I'd say it's mostly because of the decisions of the Union team.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been way better for him, but most of those decisions were not in his hands. They were in the hands of the garrison.
Okay,
now,
before we talk about what happened to D.H. Hill, I'm real curious about these reinforcements that were threatening to come on the map. Did they make it on?
They did. So those reinforcements are the Union 6th Corps under General Franklin.
Right.
And so basically the Union team was told that they had the option to choose up to 4 corps for the Battle of South Mountain. But if they wanted to, they could divert one of those corps and send it to Harper's Ferry along a road that the Confederates had neglected to guard. And so they elected to send 6th Corps along that road. And one of the Confederate decisions that they were able to make is, would you like to attack on the 15th or the 16th? Or, sorry, on the 14th or the 15th of September. If you attack on the 14th, the garrison has ammo for their artillery guns. If you attack on the 15th, they don't, and are in a reduced position. But remember, the Battle of South Mountain happens on the 14th, not on the 15th.
So you could be risking,
there's the threat of the Union Army.
Right.
So they elected to attack on the 14th. But there's still, the Union are attacking with less force on South Mountain. But now there's this corps coming in to try and break out Harper's Ferry.
Hmm. So what happened at the Battle of South Mountain? Did that prove decisive that the Union had detached a corps to come back to Harper's Ferry?
Yeah, so the Battle of South Mountain, if I actually pull up, I've got a save here of South Mountain. Uh, Battle of South Mountain pretty much uh, went, historically speaking, very well for the Union compared to what had actually happened. Now, this is the final state of South Mountain. The Confederates had this whole line of trenches up here at the top of the mountain,
Right.
and they elected to try a forward defense, try and ease the Union back towards the trenches before then unleashing the defensive
Wait.
capabilities of the trenches
Wait.
on them.
They went forward out of the trenches?
Yes, and it did
Oh
not end
my.
well for
Oh
them.
wow. Wow. Why would you do that? The entire point of trenches is not so that you have a fallback position, but so that you never have to fall back by
Right.
defending in the trenches.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that was the Union team discovered those trenches at the end of the battle when they had taken the ground,
oh man.
and they just shuddered at the luck they had been given. That if they had tried to attack these trenches, it would have been a much bloodier affair for them.
Oh
Um,
wow. I'm not even going to ask the commander's name. I don't want to put the poor fellow on blast. Um, but I hope they learned. I
I will
really
say
do.
that the Confederate Corps commander was very annoyed that his division commanders took the initiative, or perhaps lack thereof, to move forward out of the trenches. The
Wait,
Corps
wait.
commander
So the
was
the
not happy.
the division commanders, or was it the army commander that ordered the or who's responsible for the Daniel Sickles moment?
General Hood was responsible for
So
the Daniel Sickles moment.
he's a division commander, and
Yes,
so what did he do this against orders or without orders? He did it on his own,
he did it on his own,
and
and
and then what? The rest of the army just kind of followed.
and in order to back up his flank, this division under Jones over here was forced to try and move forward to support his flank. And then they ended up fighting in these woods
Mm-hmm.
instead of fighting in the trenches, which happened to be a problem. The army commander actually was demoted to a division commander for this game due to lack of players, and so he was in charge of the division under Anderson in the south here.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and he stuck to his guns. He stuck in the trenches. It's just his flank got turned, and he was forced to evacuate. Um, so he was able to, as you can see, his defensive position is in much better shape
Yeah.
than the defensive positions in the north, in
Oh
large
yeah.
part due to his sticking to the trenches.
Please tell me you have an after action report about this.
I
Did you?
believe I have after action reports from the Union. And the
Mm,
Confederates don't seem to be as big on after action reports.
yeah, I
But
would
if I
probably make sure mine got lost in the mail. Wow. All right, all right. But you know what? Hey, that's part of what Kriegspiel's all about, right? It's totally
right.
okay to make these mistakes because it's a learning game as well. It's a training exercise. So this is where you want those mistakes to happen, and you want the players to go ahead and do that, and it makes really cool stories and interesting scenarios. So I hope whoever played Hood doesn't feel too bad about this decision and my losing my mind over it. But hey, it happens and it's interesting and they probably won't do a Daniel Sickles again.
Probably not. Yeah. Now, I might like to mention before we switch back to the Harper's Ferry map. Uh, Anyone who watched the stream that I posted for that game, South Mountain, will remember McClaw's foot engineers.
Mhm.
Um, they were basically meant to be a mobile reserve force, and
Mhm.
they started the game in this clearing up here. If I
Right?
draw,
Right?
and basically, at one point or another, they were either ordered to go towards the trench line or go towards the south to reinforce Jope.
Oh boy.
And they every hour or so, they got contradicting orders from the
Mm.
Corps Command to go in the other direction. And so they essentially created their own sunken road along this route here as they just kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
All right.
So
Wow.
there was a number of difficulties that the Confederates made for themselves that day.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, yeah, it could have gone a lot better for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, at the end of the day, the casualties were about the same, though in the pursuit, the Confederates probably would have taken a few more. So that'll be factored in the final Antietam battle, of course. Pivoting back to Harper's Ferry. So essentially, to answer your initial question, no, it didn't really make a difference, but not because the Union made the right decision necessarily. It was because of some poor decisions on the Confederate part.
Hmm.
Now, go back to Harper's Ferry. Yeah, so this corps, I'll let the map load here first. Yeah, so this corps pretty much was going to arrive on the map at 9 a.m. Now,
Right.
the scenario starts at 0500 in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so by 0730, the position was beginning to collapse in Harper's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
D.H. Hill was very expensively forcing his way across the bridge, and A.P. Hill's division had exploited the gap in the line on the what we liked to call the Bavaria Heights, even though they're called the Boulevard Heights. Bavaria was the guy playing the Union.
Right.
And so Harper's Ferry was collapsing. The position was gone. But the Union had decided they'd been given the option at 0530 to begin a force march. Now, this would incur some penalties on them. Their troops would be somewhat tired upon arriving on the field. In fact, they all started the game at white disruption when they got on.
Mm-hmm.
But they managed to force march it so that they got to this position at around 0730. Unfortunately, not in time to save the garrison, but fortunately, just in time to prevent the Confederates from really digging in Harper's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
Because, spoiler alert, the Confederate plan initially was to not fight at Antietam at all. They were going to hold at South Mountain, at least for a while, and then dig in on the Maryland Heights and defend them out the wazoo. And the idea was that would buy them time to repair the bridge in Harper's Ferry and allow them to extricate themselves across the Potomac back into Virginia as per the ultimate scenario objective through Harper's Ferry rather than Sharpsburg. But because of the disaster at South Mountain and then what's about to happen with 6th Corps here at Harper's Ferry, both Confederate Corps have been forced back to Sharpsburg. So if I switch to the final game state here, which is more accurate to what we're talking about with 6th Corps, and we can also see the very pretty fire of the arsenal after it got blown up.
Hey, I thought that was really cool. I really want that effect.
Yeah, ask John for it. He has that fire effect.
Very nice.
So yeah, you can see the arsenal is on fire. We actually had Union and Confederate brigades having to form bucket brigades to keep the fire contained so that it wouldn't spread to the rest of the town. It was a lot of fun with that. But so as you can see, 6th Corps arrived on the field, and the 2 Confederate divisions had pretty much just arrived on these heights and were setting up their artillery to start bombarding the town when they saw dust clouds from down the Potomac River Valley.
Right.
And they had been, in their cavalry report, forewarned that one of the corps they were expecting at South Mountain, that was in the van of the Union column, was no longer there. They didn't know whether it had been shunted back to the reserves or whatnot. Some of them even suspected it was going around to the north side, trying to outflank from the north. But Jope, to his credit, immediately when he saw that report of the dust clouds, said, "My God, that's the missing corps." And so both Confederate divisions, with unusual speed compared to their initial movements, reacted very quickly. A first defensive line was established. They pretty much ran into the front sides of each other around the Miller farm here.
Mm.
The Confederates were basically fighting a delaying action. The division of Jones was trying to delay the Sixth Corps' advance long enough for General Lawton to establish a defensive position upon the heights.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you can see, he dug trenches while the other Confederate division was buying him time. And it was pretty much right as the scenario ended. Harper's Ferry had been captured, all of the units surrendered. That Sixth Corps was just starting to form up its battle line.
Mm.
And they were about to begin their assault on the Maryland Heights, but the Confederates were pretty much going to not put up much of a fight for the Maryland Heights. They had essentially accomplished their objective when these brigades got behind the Maryland Heights. And they were just going to evacuate north towards Sharpsburg.
Makes
sense.
And
so after a forced march and then a sprint up the hill, Sixth Corps was not going to be in the position to pursue.
Right.
Yeah, I was. So that's pretty much where it ended.
Yeah, I was of the impression that if you put a battery here and fire this way, if the Union comes along that road, there would be a wonderful and fierce firefight right there. Right there.
And the Union saw that death trap and avoided it by just deploying to the north of that.
Yeah.
They got off the road right here. Just went straight over.
Okay. Now, all I need to hear from you is the $10,000 question, the answer to the $10,000 question, which is, what happened to D.H. Hill, and why didn't you impose the consequences brought upon by the die roll?
Yeah, so, you know the scene in Infinity War where Doctor Strange is saying, he's asked, what are our chances of winning? And he says, 1, right? In like however many trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I rolled a d20 and said if it lands on 1, he dies, or it gets hit.
Right.
And so I rolled it for 3 commanders, and D.H. Hill was the one that it rolled a 1 on.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, all right, it's a 50-50 shot if he gets hit that he's killed or wounded. Low or high for getting killed? And they said low.
Mm-hmm.
Rolled the dice, rolled a 3. And I was not happy about that because I just knew that this guy, he was already feeling terrible after losing. He looked like Pickett after Pickett's charge.
I'm sure.
And so I was like, oh, man, adding insult to injury? Oh, right.
So this was an act of mercy then. You simply didn't want to rub salt in the wound by killing him. What was the circumstance, though, that even exposed him to begin with? Did he expose himself? Did he give an order where he was exposed?
So basically, he was standing with his artillery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I switch back here to the part where the Harper's Ferry garrison still existed, there were 2 batteries, in fact 4 batteries of Union artillery that at that point were firing counter battery onto his battery.
Yeah, the players love counter battery a little too much, I must say, but anyway.
And so he's standing up here with 2 batteries. In fact, I can just grab the batteries.
Mm-hmm.
He's standing up here, and his guys are having a gay old time shooting on down into Harper's Ferry. And then all of a sudden, rolls the D1 or D20 on a 1. A shell explodes overhead, and he's stunned. Basically, he's knocked off his horse, unconscious. His head hits the ground hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much how we dealt with that, is that he lost consciousness for 3 turns. And, so it was an act of mercy, but he still got a consequence equivalent to him being killed, because if you had been killed, it would have been, all right, wait a few turns, and then your subordinate will take over, right? You can play as your subordinate.
Right.
But so it had the same consequence, it just didn't have the same lore,
Right. So his units were not able to do anything or give any orders for a few turns, right? They were
which was
on their own.
Actually the critical point of the attack, where he was thinking about recalling the attack as they were still crossing the bridge at that point.
Right.
And while he was unconscious, it was then that his troops forced the gap and broke through. Um, so he probably would have recalled the attack and would have taken less casualties for it. But his troops, without extra orders, continued assaulting and ramming themselves into Harper's Ferry and managed to achieve a breakthrough. So,
Well, there you
it
have
all
it.
worked out in the end, I suppose.
There you have it. A little bit of Burnside's Bridge. So, what a really cool battle. We have a little bit of Burnside's Bridge. We have a little bit of Jackson doing Jackson things, smashing through. We have a little bit of Daniel Sickles. It's kind of cool to see how the players, when faced with similar circumstances that historical generals were faced with, make similar decisions, even though it's completely different circumstances. It's very interesting to see them use the same logic. It's very easy for us to sit here as armchair generals and historians and say, what an idiot, why did that person do that? But then when you're actually faced with that decision in the game, you might be tempted to make the same exact call, which is what's so wonderful about Kriegsspiel. It makes you realize you can't judge some of these historical figures too harshly, and we really shouldn't judge the players too harshly either. That fog of war really messes with your mind, and that's what makes Kriegsspiel a one-of-a-kind game. Carter, thank you for the overview and answering all of these wonderful questions. What a really cool and fun episode, and I really look forward to doing more with you soon. Anything you want to
Oh,
throw
yeah.
out there for the players?
Well, spoiler alert, November 20th,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be playing on this wonderful map. I'm going to actually, in between now and then, fill in some more of the fields so that you can tell what's what. But yeah, so we're going to play the whole Battle of Antietam. We're going to try and get, I think, something like 30 players and 10, 15 umpires together to run 8 hours of combat is the idea.
Wow.
From about 0500 to, well, when the battle stops. So we'll see how far we can get. And it's going to be a epic clash. And then, if I may also plug something else I'm doing.
Sure, go ahead.
Don't worry, it's IKS.
No, I'm not worried. Go ahead.
Yes. We're also planning something of a sequel to Grand Antietam.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to load these maps here.
It's
You're
looking
probably
like
going to load these maps before me.
it looks like Chancellorsville. And hey,
It
there it
does look
is.
like Chancellorsville. Yeah, so I'm going to be running a play by email or play by Discord post Chancellorsville campaign, where everything is done at the tactical level, but it is an operational level game. And it should be a lot of fun. And some players in the Antietam campaign were talking about how they'd really love to have a lot more agency in the overall movement of their armies.
Right.
And having a map that has about 200 square miles of area, plus, it's about 21 miles from side to side and about 16 miles from north to south. That gives you a lot of agency, I'd say. So it should be a lot of fun. And of course, Marshall, you're going to be playing Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, I sure
the
am.
Army of Northern Virginia. So if you want to play with the one and only, sign up.
There you have it. There you have it, folks. All right. Yes, folks, head on over to our Discord, join the IKS, reach out to Carter or myself, or just post in the general chat that you are interested in finding out more about this game and joining up, and absolutely you'll be welcome to play. Well, Carter, thank you so much for everything. I want to thank all of our viewers who've been watching a little bit longer episode than usual, but it's a special episode, a fun episode, and I look forward to doing a lot more like this. We will see everyone, of course, next Sunday at 9 a.m. Thank you all for tuning in. If you're catching this on YouTube or Patreon later and you have questions, feel free